Hello, my name is Andrea Corcoran, and this is my story, Sing Me a Song. I really hope you enjoy it. The bus stop was in front of the sprawling house, and Lee could feel her eyes watching him. At least, he imagined the house as a her. She was broad with peering eyes, reminiscent of a southern lady, grand and constant. Lee could count each immaculate rose that wound through the ancient cracked wood of the Victorian mansion. Edges of blackened foundations still marked the fire that had stolen her imposing presence 20 years ago. She sat further back than the rest of the houses on the block, and her path was lined by gently swaying weeping willows. The grounds were unkempt, the grass long and scraggly. She was caged by tall iron bars. She called to him. Lee tried to shake the feeling. It was only the stupid stories his cousin told him, the merest fancies of an urban legend. They say the fire was started by a jaded boyfriend while her parents were out of town. By the time the firemen got the fire put out, they were both dead in the kitchen. Now everyone says that if you come here at night, you'll still see the flicker of fire in the edges of the windows. On windy nights you can still hear her singing and weeping. No one knows what happened to the boy. Her cousin had told the story well, with the right dramatic pauses and conspirator glances. He'd scoffed at her, telling her that she was too old for fairy tales. She'd only shrugged. If she doesn't exist, then who takes care of the roses? Lee shuddered once again before he leaned against the stone gate that separated the injured house from the rest of the world. He didn't pause as he took his guitar out and strummed a few chords. The bus wouldn't be here for 2 more minutes at least, and he needed something to keep his mind from ghost stories. The music was sad and halting as it flowed from his precious instrument. No matter how hard he tried, his mind wandered to the story, to the whispered sufferings his cousin had planted so easily in his ear. He sighed slightly. Whenever he dwelled on an object long enough, it would begin to show up in his music. Who ever heard of school in the summer, Lee thought, as the bus squealed to a stop in front of him. It was something to get used to, year-round school, but then again, what wasn't there to get used to in Mississippi? He heaved a sigh as he slipped his guitar into its case and slung it over his shoulder. New state, new school, new life. Somehow it didn't feel so new as he stepped into the vibrating stairs and into the cacophonous clamorage of teenagers going to school. He shut his eyes for a moment before he took the next available empty seat and glanced outside. He watched the houses fade from sight as the bus sputtered to life and pulled its heavy weight forward. There was something dragging at him, nipping at his subconscious. It made shivers run through the length of his spine and his hair stand on end. Though the bus took him further from the lady house, separated from the world by iron bars, he could still feel her eyes trail behind, gazing and wanting. A thought flitted through his mind. Who took care of the roses? Time stands still within the ash and gray. It has no hold against the ruins of a perfect life, no hold on the remnants of a lovely face. I know no end of the echoes of memory. Each night I relive the flames. Each night I return to that one instant in time, and each night I burn in my hell. When I burn, I scream. I always scream. I don't move, but I scream. Still, time had not moved. He did not allow it to move. My first few years I was bitter, resentful. The night shook with the resounding of my lament. Who was he to steal me from my obedient world? Should he have simply laid down his free thought and followed me as the others had? A bitter laugh follows the wayward thought, and I shake my head. Loneliness followed, as it always does in stories of old, and he took pity on me. Books began to appear daily, allowing me a glimpse into the world that had forgotten its tiny would-be goddess. Now there is only sorrow and regret in my heart. I see beauty in the pages I hold, and read against candlelight. Words that have changed my life, words that have been my only company for over a decade. They judged me, showed me the error of what I had done, and then they forgave me where he could not. They are my companions, and prepare me for my nightly burnings. I fear for when he tires of condoning me this simple pleasure. I was reading when I felt the first stirrings of change. It jerked me away from the story of snow in the wardrobe, of a lion sacrificing himself for who he loved, and I looked up through the window that showed me the only glimpse of the world I was punished from. I stood, scarcely believing that after all this time it would be now. I watched him from the edge of the scarred room, just past eyesight, just past the sunlight that I longed for. though it would only pass through me. I listened to the strummed heart chords against the guitar, and I ached along with him. My fingertips grazed against the edge of the porcelain mask, melted to my skin. A sigh fluttered past unmoving lips, skittering the dust mote that floated in the sunlight just past my reach. "Will you come for me?" I whispered. Lee's heart pounded against his chest, straining against the cage of bones. His hands clenched almost protectively over the neck of his guitar. She stood past the iron gates, more imposing in the night than in the day. The moonlight seemed to bathe the roses in an iridescent crimson glow. The willows that lined the walkway fluttered in an almost non-existent breeze. Lee swallowed. "Why am I so afraid?" he wondered for a moment. It was just a house. The thought earned a shake of his head immediately. It wasn't only a house. She'd haunted his dreams, turning them to nightmares of fire and dresses. For the last few days he'd dreamt of the house, but it was only a half-remembered instance in time. Each time he woke with a name unspoken on his lips and a haunting melody in his head. "Sing for me, sing me a song of frozen hearts and petals." He wanted to finish the song. So here he was in the sticky heat of the Mississippi summer, where the air was so heavy with cloying humidity that it was difficult to breathe, trying to build enough courage to cross the ancient iron gates. He wasn't afraid of getting caught trying to cross private property. There were no lights except for the pale lantern that he'd stopped to rest beneath. The civilized world was either dead or asleep, leaving the night for the crickets and frogs. If that wasn't what was keeping him from the Victorian mansion, then what was? The air was still, as heavy as iron, and waiting on him. Finally Lee slung his guitar over his shoulder and took a firm grip on the iron bars. The gate rattled and shook as he climbed over it and dropped to the ground. The instant his feet touched the earth, something slid against him. It caused him to shiver because, though nothing had touched him, there was still a new presence around him. To him, it was almost like the feel of the air right before a lightning strike. Pinpricks of energy played with each cell of his skin, tingling along his entirety and reaching beneath the skin to clench hold on his heart. Lee shivered again in the heat of the night and rubbed his arms to get rid of the goosebumps. In the stillness, someone screamed. The sound was intense, shattering any pretense of peace in the dead night. Lee started as the light sprung to life in the recesses of one of the windows of the abandoned home. "What the—" He didn't waste an effort finishing his sentence as the light brightened in the window and he ran toward it. Something caused him to pause when he reached the home. There was no smell of smoke, and the flickering flames seemed pale and non-existent, barely flickering past the tattered curtains. Nothing seemed real, more like the shadows of reality. Still, he remembered the scream, and even now he could hear the mutters of a pained conversation. After a moment of debate, Lee pushed his way through the rose bushes, earning long scratches from the thorns, and peered through the window the light source came from. "God, Devin, please, not again." Lee could only catch glimpses through the material. It was the kitchen. He could see the charred remains of a stove and fridge. His eyes widened as his gaze fell on the crumpled form of the body. Most of her was lost in the froth of lace and furls of soft blue silk, but he could see the golden curls pinned from her face, and from beneath that the barest glimpse of a mask. "Answer my request, then." The voice was indescribable, and it sent an immediate chill down Lee's body. There wasn't anything human about it. Pure, primal emotion drawn together into contortions meant to resemble English words. Lee tried to see who had spoken, but a piece of material covered the part of the window that showed him. All he could see was a hulking shape. "Go to hell, Devin. We would both have peace." This time the voice seemed softer, full of cruel pity, "if you would only give in." The girl's breasts were ragged, and Lee watched her back heave, the corset of the dress strained against the racking sobs. "You've already broken me. What more is there left? I've begged, I've pleaded, I've repented. We both know you keep me here without hope, but I will not give in." Her cracked voice took some strength. "You may have killed me, but you will never have me." "Pity," he sighed. "You hold the keys to our prison. If only you would let go." "Why?" The word was choked with hatred, and she looked up. Lee could now see the beautiful porcelain mask, a blue butterfly on one side of her face, and a weeping woman on the other. Beneath the mask was a glimmer of ethereal green eyes. "Why, Devon?" "Because I can," Devon snapped. "Because in this small piece of your world I am God. You made your mistake and now you pay for it." The wind rustled and Lee felt something begin to stir in the air. Where the night was muggy and suffocating, a cold wind whipped through the willows that lined the entrance to the home. It brought a rotting smell with it, like musk and graves. "Please, Devon, mercy, please." Her words were cut off as the wind wrapped around her. She ignited with a pealing scream. Lee yelled in horror. Again the wind rose, and in that instant Devon took a step into his line of view. The body that stood with a pane of glass to separate them was inhuman and demonic. There were only the shadows, inconsistent and incomplete, and there was something shining in the form, like a pool of oil or the shell of a massive beetle. The color of the roaring flames reflected off the relatively smooth, featureless mask. He couldn't see where the head began from the torso. There was no nose, no mouth. There was only his eyes. His eyes, deathless, yet Lee could see no end. A coil of raw emotions of power and hatred rested in the center of the red and black slants that saw the world in colors no mortal would. The gaze was ageless and young, a conundrum that Lee felt would swallow him whole. He couldn't break away, and in that gaze he felt the fires of hell reach out toward him. Lee watched a smile unfurl, like a mass of white worms crawling against the surface of a rotting corpse. He could catch glimpses of red and yellow, of teeth and fire.